So I came across a video about Sodom and Gomorrah, the same typical so-called mythical and mystical legend about the two cities that were raised by the so-called divine wrath. Instantly that I saw the video and read the bit about it that was written on it, I had kind of a revelation. And I said, given the fact that each and every bit of our history has been mystified, has been lied, cheated, and, well, warped, manipulated, whatever way you want to call it, I, I came with a, more like a revelation. See, if you read the descriptions about that, nothing about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah actually felt like a divine wrath. Yes? If we are to think a bit about it. They say that yellow haze or yellow clouds actually came and swept through the land, burning everyone alive. That sounds more like a nuclear blast to me, honestly. If you remember the little cartoon that the Japanese did on Hiroshima. Yes, nice graphics and very impressive effects, especially the slowdowns on that episode. Yes, they were very heartbreaking. But they just show the grotesqueness of how our actions can reveal the worst that consciousness has to offer. Yes? Because we are just nothing else but a pendulum swinging from one side to another of the consciousness. Yes, nothing is good, nothing is bad within us. We just pendulate in between layers and levels of consciousness. Yes, we are just vessels of it. And just like any other race on its track towards enlightenment, we shall go through all the possible nooks and crannies. And obviously, most of those nooks and crannies are obviously in the most dense corners of hatred, separation, fear, control, dominion, and whatever else you may want. See, nowadays, every time you see an empire wanting to destroy something, obviously the public has to be convinced that part, that side is the enemy, right? It has always been done so, and unfortunately, religions are fully to blame on this because they were entrained by society, well, six societies, to act as weapons of vengeance, as weapons of support for the narcissistic zealots, the zealots actually, the fanatics that overwhelmed the cores of religions. Yes, the Zionists behind Christianity, a lot of fake leaders within Islam, and obviously Judaism hasn't been, well, it hasn't been any exception as well. So even religion was used as a means to promote the idea of killing anyone else that doesn't belong to your group, right? And always make it that it is divinity's will, because when you make something divinity's will, nobody will question divinity, right? Nobody will question divinity, nobody will challenge divinity, not even the illusionary concept behind the so called overpowered, overwhelming divinity. Yes, make it God's will, and the blind will follow. Sounds like a very convincing script. Well, let's think a bit more. When we look at nowadays, what have we seen? Some powers, they will always become greedy. If they end up too much in control, obviously they will conduct all sorts of hideous acts, which they will hide behind accidents, behind false news, behind so-called terrorism, drug acts, or anything that has to impress the public, overload their emotions, and make them backfire against them, so that they are convinced that the perpetrators are actually nothing else but heroes. What if Sodom and Gomorrah were nothing else but the opposite? Yes, you have been convinced, most likely, that those were places of idolatry, right? Why was it presented that it was the place of homosexuality and sexual frustrations? Because according to Christianity, that was forbidden. Yes, and obviously that was somewhat, or hopefully was somewhat more important back in those times. But it was only a necessity for a hideous act to be done. You have to understand, people like the Zionists need huge amounts of human sacrifices because this is how they can entertain the powers that they made a deal with a long time ago. They must be fed energy, the most vibrant of energy, and since keeping humans ignorant will not make them very vibrant, obviously you will need huge numbers of them to be sacrificed. And Sodom and Gomorrah have been nothing else most likely than an event that happened in a dramatic way just so that something would be changed forever. Just like some situation happened and some part of a town would be destroyed or a capital would be destroyed so that the empire itself rebrands itself, yes, resets itself and everything that was once that way into a new form. Yes, you've been seeing things like this. Even the pandemic was used by some great power, an empire, well, kind of on the falling, a ruined empire, but still kicking, unfortunately, with its last flaps. But, the point is, it's still doing its heinous acts. It's promoting equality and everything that would make people feel comfortable and nice, but on the other side is doing everything horrible. Because the problem with America is that it ended up as the slave of two masters, and you can never serve two masters. And if we are to speak about this, most definitely Sodom and Gomorrah have been uh, probably the opposite. Look at the mainstream media nowadays. Every time they tell you something is bad, obviously it's bad because they want you to see it as bad. Most likely doesn't have any guilt or something. Yes, when the USA did their coup and splintered Yugoslavia, what fault did they have? Yes, but separation means power for those who are in control. Yes, when they flattened Iraq, what guilt did the Iraqi people have? Yes, and everywhere where the USA have gone, well, most likely the Zionists behind USA have guided their soldiers. Wherever they went, they obviously left only devastation. Yes. So one may look at Sodom and Gomorrah as possibly something completely opposite. What if it was a center of, I don't know, a center of purity? A center that housed probably some occult powers, or maybe some still very powerful practices when it came to paganism. Okay, paganism also had some powerful occultism, and maybe they did not accept the way of well, whatever the force of those times wanted to impose on them. Yes, what if were not easily conquered? Yes, because when you look at the Bible and the scribblings of those times, you don't know how advanced those people were. Yes, to suddenly tell me that every possible parameter of a nuclear explosion happened back then and still try to convince me that those were of medieval times, wasn't it also similar to Tartaria, as of what I heard, or the last remnant of true Europe, before the Zionists dealt a crippling blow everywhere in the world, in Washington, in Moscow, in many capitals within Europe, just so that they would impose their reset and they would destroy certain things? Don't you think many of the libraries, like for example Alexandria, were not burned out of just some random force busting into it to burn it? You know, it's not common that barbarians would actually give, give fires on libraries. Villagers like the Mongols were not that dumb as some may portray them. They had very advanced music tastes. They had arts of their own. Yes? And let's not forget, they had a lot of influence from Asia as well. Not because of just pillaging and plundering, but also out of some cultural exchanges that happened before that. Yes, before their rise. And I doubt they would have been that disinterested in, wisdom. Most likely they were interested in killing the people. Probably they would have left the wisdom in there and they wouldn't have cared much, I guess. But, well, to each their own. We don't know the real history. These are just pure possibilities. and I'm just raising these points of view to whoever wants to see beyond the veil of illusions. Yes? And, well, many other events. What if everything about them was just rescripted so it suits a certain narrative? See, when the Zionists, the first ones, ascended to power, they did so because they traded a lot of their life to some higher force. A force that you may call the devil. Well, it's not quite the devil, but it is a powerful force which granted them spiritual capabilities without the necessary scaffolding. And they managed to reach a place of power and understanding and comprehension of the cosmos beyond most of the humans on this planet. And they managed to do that in a very fast time because they somehow cheated their way by signing a big part of them. Many of them lost it because they could not control, knowing so much of the futures, knowing so much of the possibilities, and, well, many went crazy. In the end, all went crazy and had to invent all sorts of stories because they were of a genocidal tribe. They were of a genocidal, let's call them, nation. And, back in those times, they still had an awareness, they still had guilt. Yes? You don't think they betrayed Jesus Christ for nothing. Yes? The guilt and shame of their murders and their ancestors' genocides, well, were crippling many of those so-called leaders before some of those lost it entirely. And what you see nowadays is remnants of those who have literally no freaking consciousness. They are just nothing else but impulses seeking to destroy and demolish. The pact asked them to always tell their truth, lest they will lose something else. And the problem is, well, we don't know the truth, but they present it in their certain way. That's why you see in the Masons, the Zionists, Masons orders, you will see this idea that they must always present the truth. Yes, this is part of that deal. Don't bother asking me where I know those. I've been given hints and ideas from, let's say, different sources, cosmic sources, let's call them. And they had a very weird way of coming truthful. Whether people believe it or not, well, it is up to them, honestly. I'm not here to impose points of views. There are already bozos doing that. So hopefully this video raised a bit of awareness. You're appreciated. Take care. Enjoy life. This being said, Ferenc Board signing out.